It's that motherfucking time. Welcome to day 47 of reading every single day for 30 minutes for the rest of my life. I love it. I'm gonna keep doing this forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and I'm not gonna stop. We are at page 53, top of page 53. We got the bear. And we got 30 minutes on the clock. Let's do it. Starting now. Let's go. Sorry for the cups and stuff in the back. I just needed some water. Little of all this, of course, reached the ears of ordinary hobbits, but even the deafest of the most stay at home began to hear queer tales, and those whose business took them to the border saw strange things. The conversation in the Green Dragon at Bywater one evening in the spring of Frodo's 50th year showed that even in the comfortable heart of the Shire rumors had been heard, though most hobbits still laughed at them. Sam Gamgee was sitting in one corner near the fire, and opposite him was Ted Sandyman, the miller's son, and there was various other rustic hobbits listening to their talk. "Queer things you do hear these days, to be sure," said Sam. "Ah," said Ted, "you do if you listen. But I can hear fireside tales and children's stories at home if I want to." "No doubt you can," retorted Sam, "and I dare say there's more truth in some of them than you can reckon. Who invented the stories anyway? Take dragons now." "No, thank ye," said Ted. "I won't. I heard tell of them when I was a youngster, but there's no call to believe in them now. There's only one dragon in Bywater, and that's green," he said, getting a general laugh. "All right," said Sam, laughing with the rest. "What about these tree men, these giants, as you might call them? They do say that one bigger than a tree was seen by way beyond the North Moors not long back." "Who's they?" "My cousin Hall, for one. He works for Mr. Boffin at Overhill, and goes up to the North Fair thing for the hunting. He saw one, says he did, perhaps. Your Hall's always saying that he's seen things, and maybe he's seen things that ain't there. But this one was as big as an elm tree, and walking 7 yards to a stride if it was an inch." "Then I bet it wasn't an inch." I'm a little tired, guys. "I bet it wasn't an inch. When saw was an elm tree, as not. But this one was walking, I tell you, and there's no elm tree on the North Moors." "Then Hall can't have seen one," said Ted. There was some laughing and clapping. The audience seemed to think that Ted had scored a point. "All the same, Sam, you can't deny that others beside our halfus have seen queer folk crossing the Shire. Crossing it, mind you. There are more that are turned back at the borders. The bounders have never been so busy before. And I've heard that the elves are moving west. They do say that they are going to harbors away beyond the White Towers." Sam waved his arm vaguely. Neither he nor any of them knew how far it was at sea, past the old towers beyond the western borders of the Shire. But it was an old tradition that away over there stood the grey havens, from which at times elven ships set sail, never to return. "They are sailing over the sea. They are going to the west and leaving us," said Sam, half chanting the words, shaking his head sadly and solemnly. But Ted laughed. "Well, that isn't anything new. If you believe the old tales, and I don't see what matters to me or you, let them sail. But I warrant you haven't seen them doing it, nor anyone else in the Shire." "Well, I don't know," said Sam thoughtfully. He believed he had once seen an elf in the woods, and still hoped to see more one day. Of all the legends that he had heard in the early years, such fragments of tales and half-remembered stories about the elves as hobbits knew had always moved him most deeply. "There are some, even in these parts, as know the fair folk and get news of them," he said. "There's Mr. Baggins now, that I work for. He told me that they were sailing, and he knows a bit about elves. And old Mr. Bilbo knew many more. Many's the talk I had with him when I was a little lad." Oh, they're both cracked, said Ted. Leastways, old Bilbo was cracked, and Frodo's cracking. If that's where you get your news from, you'll never want moonshine. Well, friends, I'm off home. Your good health. He drained his mug and went out noisily. Sam sat silent and said no more. He had a good deal to think about. For one thing, there was a lot to do in the Bag End garden, and he would have a busy day tomorrow, if the weather cleared. The grass was growing fast, but Sam had more up his mind than gardening. After a while, he sighed and got up and went out. It was in early April, and the sky was now clearing after heavy rain. The sun was down, and a cool, pale evening was quietly fading into the night. He walked home under the early stars through Hobbiton and up the hill, whistling softly and thoughtfully. It was just at this time that Gandalf reappeared after his long absence. For 3 years after the party he had been away. Then he paid Frodo a brief visit, and after taking a good look at him, he went off again. During the next year or two, he had turned up fairly often, coming unexpectedly after dusk and going off without warning before sunrise. He would not discuss his own business and journeys, and seemed chiefly interested in small news about Frodo's health and doings. Then suddenly his visits had ceased. It was over 9 years since Frodo had seen or heard of him, and he had begun to think that the wizard would never return or had given up all the interest in hobbits. But that evening, as Sam was walking home and twilight was fading, there came the once familiar tap on the study window. Frodo welcomed his old friend in surprise with great delight. They looked hard at one another. "Ah, well," said Gandalf, "you look the same as ever, Frodo." "So do you," Frodo replied. But secretly he thought that Gandalf looked older and more careworn. He pressed him for the news of himself and of the wide world, and soon they were deep in talk, and they stayed up far into the night. Next morning, after a late breakfast, the wizard was sitting with Frodo by the open window of the study. A bright fire was on the hearth, but the sun was warm, and the wind was in the south. Everything looked fresh, and the new green of spring was shimmering in the fields and the tips of the trees' fingers. Gandalf was thinking of a spring, nearly 80 years before, when Bilbo had run out of Bag End without a handkerchief. His hair was perhaps whiter than it had been, and his beard and eyebrows were perhaps longer, and his face was more lined with care and wisdom. But his eyes were as bright as ever, and he smoked and blew smoking rings with the same vigor and delight. He was smoking now in silence, but Frodo was sitting still, deep in thought. Even in the light morning, he felt the dark shadow of the tiding that Gandalf had brought. At last he broke the silence. "I'm getting tired, guys." "Last night you began to tell me strange things about my ring, Gandalf," he said, "and then you stopped, because you said that such matters were best left until daylight. Don't you think you had better finish now? You say the ring is dangerous, far more dangerous than I guess. In what way?" "In many ways," answered the wizard. "It is far more powerful than I ever dared to think at first, so powerful that in the end it would utterly overcome anyone of mortal race who possessed it. It would possess him. In Eregion, long ago, many elven rings were made, magic rings as you call them, and they were, of course, of various kinds, some more potent and some less. The lesser rings were only essays in the craft before it was full grown, and to the elven smiths they were trifles, yet still to my mind dangerous for mortals. But the great rings, the rings of power, they were perilous. A mortal, Frodo, who keeps one of the great rings, does not die, but he does not grow or obtain more life. He merely continues until at last every minute is a weariness. And if he often uses the ring to make himself invisible, he fades. He becomes in the end invisible permanently, and walks in the twilight under the eye of the dark power that rules the rings. Yes, sooner or later. Later if Yes, sooner or later. Later, if he is strong or well-meaning to begin with, but neither strength nor good purpose will last. Sooner or later, the dark power will devour him." "How terrifying!" said Frodo. There was another long silence. The sound of Sam Gamgee cutting the lawn came from the garden. How long have you known this? Asked Frodo at length. And how much did Bilbo know? Bilbo knew more than he told you, I am sure, said Gandalf. He would certainly never have passed on to you anything that he thought would be a danger, even though I promised to look after you. He thought the ring was very beautiful and very useful at need. And if anything was wrong or queer, it was himself. He said that it was growing on his mind and he was always worrying about it, but he did not suspect that the ring itself was to blame. Though he had always found that the thing needed for after, it did not seem always the same size or weight. It shrank or expanded in the odd way, and it might suddenly slip off of a finger where it had been so tight. Yes, he warned me of that in his last letter, said Frodo, so I have always kept it on his chain. I think that's third yawn. Very wise, said Gandalf. But as for the long life, Bilbo never connected with the ring at all. He took all the credit for that to himself, and he was very proud of it, though he was getting restless and uneasy, thin and stretched, he said, a sign that the ring was getting control. How long have you known all this? Asked Frodo again. Known? Said Gandalf. I have known much that only the wise do not know, one might say. I have known much that only the wise know, Frodo. But if you mean known about this ring, well, I still do not know, one might say. There is a last test to make, but I no longer doubt my guess. When did I first begin to guess? He mused, searched back in the memory. Let me see, it was in the year that the White Council drove the Dark Power from Mirkwood, just because the battle of the 5 armies that Bilbo found his ring. A shadow fell on my heart then, though I did not know what I feared. Oh my god, 4th yawn. We're gonna do the yawn count, guys. Do it in the comments. There is a last test to make, but no longer doubt my... Wait, what? But if you mean known for this ring, well... When did I first begin to guess? He mused, searching back in his memory. Let me see. It was in the year that the White Council drove the Dark Power from Mirkwood, just before the Battle of the 5 Armies, that Bilbo found his ring. A shadow fell on... A shadow... my arm, guys. I gotta switch my reading position. Hold on. I think this will be good. When did I first begin to guess? He mused, searching back in his memory. Let me see. It was the year that the White Council drove the Dark Power from Mirkwood, just before the Battle of the 5 Armies, that Bilbo found his ring. A shadow fell on the heart then, though I did not know what I feared. Yet what I feared. I wondered often how Gollum came to be a great ring. As plainly it was, that at least was clear from the first. Then I heard Bilbo's strange story of how he had won it, and I could not believe it. When I at last got the truth out of him, I saw at once that he had been trying to put his claim to the ring beyond doubt. Much like Gollum with his birthday present, the lies were too much alike for my comfort. Clearly the ring had an unwholesome power that set to work on its keeper at once. That was the first real warning I had that was not all well. I told Bilbo often that such rings were better left unused, but he resented it, and soon got angry. There was little else I could do. I could not take it away from him without doing greater harm, and I had no right to do so anyway. I could only watch and wait. I might perhaps have consulted Saruman the White, but something always held me back. Who is he? Asked Frodo. I have never heard of him before. Maybe not, answered Gandalf. Hobbits are or were no concern of his, yet he was great among the wise. He was the chief of my order and yet head of the council. His knowledge is deep, but his pride has grown with it, and he takes ill any meddling. The lore of the elven rings, great and small, is his province. He has long studied it, seeking the lost secrets of their making. But when the rings were debated in the council, all that he would reveal to us of his ring lore told against my fears. So my doubts slept but uneasily. Still I watched and waited. And all that seemed well with Bilbo in the years past, yes, they passed, and they passed not to touch him. He showed no signs of the age. The shadow fell on me again. But I said to myself, after all the after all he comes of a long-lived family of his mother's side. There's is still time yet. Wait. And I waited until that night when he left his house. He said and did the things that filled me with a fear that no words of the Saruman could allay. I knew at last that something dark and deadly was at work, and I have spent most of my years since then in finding out the truth of it. There wasn't any permanent harm done, was there? Asked Frodo anxiously. He would get it all right in time, wouldn't he? Be able to rest in peace, I mean? He felt better at once, said Gandalf, but there was only one power in this world that knows all about the rings and their effects, and as far as I know, there is no power in the world that knows all about hobbits. Among the wise, I am the only one that goes in the hobbit lore, an obscure branch of knowledge, the full of surprises, soft as butter they can be, and yet sometimes as tough as old tree roots. I think it likely that some would resist the rings far longer than most of the wise would believe. I don't think you need to worry about Bilbo. Of course, he possessed the ring for many years and used it, so it might take a long while for the influence to wear off. Before it was safe for him to see it again, for instance. Otherwise, he might live on for years quite happily. Just stop as he was when he parted with it. For he gave it up in the end for his own accord. An important point. No, I was not troubled about dear Bilbo any more. Once he had let the thing go, it is for you that I feel responsible. Ever since Bilbo left, I have been deeply concerned about you and about all the charming, absurd, helpless hobbits. It would be a previous blow to the world if the dark power overcame the Shire, and if all your kind, jolly, stupid Bolger, hornblowers, boffins, and brace-birtles and the rest, not to mention the ridiculous Bagginies, became enslaved. Frodo shuddered. But why should we be? He asked, and why should he want such slaves? To tell you the truth, replied Gandalf, I believe that Hitherto, mark you, he has entirely overlooked the existence of hobbits. You should be thankful, but your safety has passed. He does not need you. He has many more useful servants, but he will not forget you again. And hobbits as miserable slaves would please him for more than hobbits happy and free. There is such a thing as malice and revenge. Revenge, said Frodo. Revenge for what? I still don't understand what all this has to do with Bilbo and myself and our ring. It has everything to do with it, said Gandalf. You do not know the real peril yet, but you shall. I was not sure of myself when I was last here, but the time has come to speak. Give me the ring for the last moment. Frodo took it from his breeches pocket, where it was clasped to the chain that hung from his belt. He unfastened it and handed it slowly to the wizard. It felt suddenly very heavy, as if either it or Frodo himself was in some way reluctant for Gandalf to touch it. Gandalf held it up. It looked to be made of pure and solid gold. Can you see any markings on it? He asked. No, said Frodo. There are none. It is quite plain, and it never shows a scratch or sign of wear. Well, then look. To Frodo's astonishment and distress, the wizard threw it suddenly into the middle of a glowing corner of the fire. Frodo gave a cry and propped for the tongs, but Gandalf held him back. Wait, he said in a commanding voice. Wait! Giving Frodo a quick look from under his bristling brows. No apparent change came over the ring. After a while, Gandalf got up, closed the shutters outside the window, and drew the curtains. The room became dark and silent. Through the clack of Shamshir's, now nearer in the windows, could still be heard faintly from the garden. For a moment, the wizard stood looking at the fire. Then he stooped and removed the ring to the hearth with the tongs, and at once picked it up. Frodo gasped. It is quite cool, said Gandalf. Take it. Frodo received it in his shrinking palm. It seemed to have become thicker and heavier than ever. Hold it up, said Gandalf, and look closely. As Frodo did, he now saw fine lines, finer than the finest pen strokes, running along the ring outside and inside, lines of fire that seemed to form in letters of a flowing script. They shone piercingly bright and yet remote, as if out of a great depth. Wow. I'm looking at him right now. I cannot read the Fury letters, said Frodo in a wavering voice. No, said Gandalf, but I can. The letters are Elvish, of ancient mode, but the language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here. But this is in the common tongue, is what is said. Close enough. One rule, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all in the darkness bind them. It is only 2 lines of a verse long known in elven lore. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 dwarfs lords in their halls of stone, 9 for the mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord in his dark throne. In the land of the Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Fifth line. I'm so freaking tired. I worked out today. I had a long ass shift. Oh my god. Damn. I'm probably never gonna come back to this video like at this exact moment, but if you're ever just browsing Isaiah and you come across this one, hi. Just chilling. I'm tired. Okay. He paused and then slowly in a deep voice, "This is the Master Ring, the one ring to rule them all. This is the one ring that he lost many years ago to the great weakening of his power. He greatly desires it, but he must not get it." Frodo sat silent and motionless. Fear seemed to stretch out a vast hand like a dark cloud rising in the east and looming up to engulf him. "This ring?" he stammered. "How on earth did it come to me?" "Ah," said Gandalf. "That is a very long story. The beginnings lie back in the black years, which only the lore masters now remember. If I were to tell you all that tale, we should still be sitting here when the spring had passed into winter. But last night I told you of Sauron the Great, the Dark Lord. The rumors that you have heard are true, but he has indeed arisen again and left his hold in Mirkwood, and returned to his ancient fastness in the dark tower of Mordor. That name even you hobbits have heard of, like a shadow of the borders of old stories. Always after a defeat and respite, the shadow takes another shape and grows again. I wish it need not to have happened in my time," said Frodo. "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And already, Frodo, our time is beginning to look black. The enemy is fast becoming very strong. His plans are far from ripe, I think, and they are ripening. We shall be very hard to put it, even if we were not for this dreadful chance. The enemy still lacks one thing to give him strength and knowledge, to beat down all resistance, break the last defenses, and cover all the lands in a second darkness. He lacks the one ring, the 3 fairness of all. The elf lords hid from him, and his hands never touched or sullied them. 7 the dwarf kings possessed, but 3 never. 3 he has recovered, and the others the dragons have possessed, but 3 the dragons have consumed. 9 he gave to mortal men, proud and great, and so ensnared them. Long ago they fell under the domination of the one. They had become ring-wraiths, shadows under the great shadow, his most terrible servants. Long ago, it is many a year since the 9 walked abroad. Yet, who knows? At the shadows grow once more, they too may walk again. But come, we will not speak of such things even in the morning of the Shire. So it is now the 9 he has gathered to himself, the 7 also, or else they are destroyed. The 3 are hidden still, but that no longer troubles him. He only needs the one, for he made that ring himself. It is his. It is his, and he let a great part of his town form a power pass into it, so that he could rule all others. If he recovers it, then he will command them all again, wherever they be, into the three, and all that he had wrought them will be laid bare, and he will be stronger than ever. And this is the dreadful chance, Frodo. He believed that the one had perished, and that the elves had destroyed it, as should have been done. But he knows now that it is not perished, and that it has been found. So he is seeking it, and all he has thought is bent on it. It is his great hope and our great fear. Why isn't it destroyed? Cried Frodo. And how did the enemy ever come to lose it, if he was so strong and it was so precious for him? He clutched the ring in his hand, as if he saw already dark fingers stretching out. Already seeing fingers stretching out to seize it. It was taken from him, said Gandalf. The strength of the elves to resist him was greater long ago, and not all men were estranged from them. The men of the Western East came to their end. That is a chapter of ancient history which might be good to recall. For there was sorrow then too, and gathering dark, but great valor, and great deeds that were not wholly vain. One day perhaps I will tell you all the tale, or you shall hear it told in full by one who knows best. For the moment, since most of you will need to know how this thing came to you, and that will be the tale enough. This is what I will say. It was Gil-galad, Elven king and Eldin of Western East, who overthrew Sauron, though they themselves perished in the deed, and Isildur, Eldin's son, cut the ring from Sildur's hand and took it for his own. Then Sauron was vanquished, of his spirit fled, and his spirit fled and was hidden for long years, until his shadow took shape again in Mirkwood. But the ring was lost. It fell into the great river Anduin and vanished. For Isildur was marching north along the east banks of the 6 yawns. Oh, when I close my eyes, I could just feel like I can just go to sleep right now. Damn, guys. I'm gonna take a sip of water. Hold on. That wasn't a sip, that was a gulp, but whatever. But the ring was lost, for Isildur was marching north along the east banks of the river, and near the Gladen fields he was waylaid by the orcs of the mountains, and almost all his folk were slain. He leaped into the waters, but the ring slipped from his finger as he swarms, and then the orcs saw him and killed him with arrows. Gandalf paused, and there was a dark pools amid the Gladen fields, he said. The ring passed out of knowledge and legend, and even so much of its history is known now to a few, and the council of the wise could discover no more. But at last I can carry on the story, I think. Long after he was, but still very long ago, there lived by the banks of the great river on the edge of the Wilderland a clever-handed and quiet-footed little people. I guess they were a kind of hobbit kind, akin to the fathers of the stewards, for they loved the river, and often swam in it, and made little boats of reeds. There was among them a family of high repute. It was large and wealthier than most, and it was ruled by a grandmother of the folk, stern and wise in the old lore such as they had. The most inquisitive and curious-minded of that family was Smeagol. He was interested in roots and beginnings. He dived into deeper pools. Into deep pools he burrowed under trees and growing plants. He tunneled into green mounds, and he ceased to look up at the hilltops or the leaves or trees or the flowers opening in the air. His head and eyes were downward. He had a friend called Diego, or similar sort, sharp-eyed, but not so quick and strong. On a time they took a boat and went down to the Gladen fields, where there were great beds of iris and flowering reeds. There Smeagol got out and went nosing about the banks, but Diego sat in the boat and fished. Suddenly a great fish took his hook, and before he knew it he dragged out and he he was dragged out and down into the water to the bottom. But then he let go of his line, for he thought he was something shining on the riverbed, and holding his breath he grabbed at it. Then up he came spluttering, with weeds in his hair and a handful of mud, and he swam to the bank. And behold, when he washed the mud away, there in his hand lay a beautiful golden ring, and it shone and glittered in the sun, so that his heart was glad. But Smeagol had been watching him from behind a tree, and Diego gloated over the ring. Smeagol came softly up behind. "Give us that, Diego, my love," said Smeagol over his friend's shoulder. Oh my god, perfect spot to end. We are at the bottom of page 62. That was day 47. See you guys 48. Let's go.